The organ of vision. Before we start, shall we describe the main words which will be used in this lecture. First of all, it is organ of vision or visual analyzer. That is the two synonyms of one thing. That is the two structures consist of the eye and some parts of the brain, or some sensory organ or part of the central nervous system which is responsible for the receiving or analyzing of visual information. The eye is the global organ in the head which consists of the eyeball and axillary apparatus and help us to receive visual information from environment. And visual pathway. It has the neural paths which connect the eye with the brain to transmit the visual information from retina to the occipital cortex. And visual field. Visual field refers to a total area in which object can be seen in the sight, peripheral vision, as you focus your eyes on the central point. The eye, as all other organs, has huge classification, such as organ of vision consists of the two main parts. There is sensory or somatic part, which is the eye, and visual pathway, or part of the central nervous system, which consists of the optic nerve, optic tract, the visual cortex, etc. And the sensory organ. It consists of the eyeball and auxiliary apparatus. The eyeball consists of the three layers coats and eye core. The three layers, they are fibrous, vascular, and retina. Each of them consists of the next parts: the sclera, cornea, the fibrous tuning. The vascular consists of the iris, choroid, and ciliary body, and retina has two parts, blind and visual part. Auxiliary apparatus consists of the three main: the lacrimal apparatus, the muscular apparatus or movement apparatus, and protective apparatus. The connective tissues which surround the eye, the conjunctiva, etc. Let's see it more detail. The eye consists of the two main parts, that is the eyeball, there is eyeball pointed by green, and the auxiliary apparatus, the accessory apparatus of the eye. The eyeball. Eyeball consists of the three layers and eye core. The eyeball has next layers. First, outer layer, fibrous, which consists of the sclera and cornea. Second one is vascular layer, which consists of the choroid, iris, and ciliary body. And last one is retina, the eye, the retina, or innermost of the three tunics of the eyeball, surround the vitreous body and continues posteriorly with the optic nerve, which is the prominent of the central nervous system. And eye core. The eye core of the eye consists of the vitreous body, humerus aquosus, and lens. First layer, fibrous layer. Fibrous layer consists of the sclera and cornea. Sclera is the top, wide outer coat of the eyeball, covering approximately 5/6 of the posterior surface of the continuous anteriorly with the cornea and posteriorly external sheath of the optic nerve. Only a small portion of the sclera is visible. The eye sees in situ in the orbital cavity. The sclera are replaced by the transparent cornea front, which form its anterior part of the fibrous layer of the eyeball. It consists of the 5 layers. The anterior corneal epithelium continues with the conjunctiva. The second is anterior lining of layer or Bowman membrane, and third, substantia propria or stroma, and till next is posterior limiting layer, descent layer, and the endothelium of anterior chamber. This transparent membrane has no any vessels or lymphatic or venous capillaries which can feed it. The structure of cornea. The cornea convex anteriorly and concave posteriorly, form the 10% of corneal thickness. The cornea continues with the sclera at the limbus. Here, the epithelium layer of the cornea merges with the epithelium of the conjunctiva at the anterior limiting lamina terminates, and corneal stroma loses its collagen density. Function of the cornea is the most powerful contributor of the optic power of the eye, accounting for 70% of its reflective power. Therefore, changes of the shape of the cornea or softness of surface of cornea has significant implications for vision, such as changes in it can cause the astigmatism or corneal cataract. Next layer of the eye is vascular layer, which consists of the choroid, consists of the iris, and consists inside by the ciliary body. The ciliary body. Okay, first, choroid. Let's start from choroid and reduce it. The choroid is the thin, pigmented vascular coat of the eyeball extending from the ora serrata of the optic nerve. It furnishes blood supply of the retina and conducts the arteries and nerves, form the parts of the vascular layer of the eyeball, along with the capillary body along with the ciliary body and iris, also referred to the uvea or uveal tract. Choroidal capillaries receive its blood supply from the long posterior ciliary arteries and recurrent branches of the anterior ciliary arteries, while the posterior choroidal receive blood from the short posterior ciliary arteries, which means this choroid receives blood supply from two sources. Anatomical relations. The choroid is located between the fibrous and the inner retina. It extends from the optic nerve posteriorly, where it's continuous with the internal sheath of the optic nerve, form the pia or arachnoid mater. Here a choroid is firmly attached to the sclera, however, elsewhere it may only be loosely attached to the sclera. And function of this thing is supply of the eyeball by providing of the several vessels and took out the waste substances from the eye by the exchange it in ciliary body, forming uroscleral pathway, and diseases related with it, such as diabetes or other vascular related diseases, can reduce or make some problems in circulation of the choroid. Next one is ciliary body. The ciliary body second part of the vascular tunic of the eye, anterior to the ora serrata, connected to the choroid with the iris. It is component of the corona ciliaris, ciliary processes and folds, ciliary orbiculus, and ciliary muscles on the basal membrane. All of the things support and has huge relationship in the function of eye, such as the ciliary body together with the choroid and iris forms the uvea of the eye, one of the coats of the eye. The ciliary body may be divided into two parts: anterior rigid corona ciliaris, parts of the plicata, and there is anterior corona ciliaris, and internal, which formed by muscles, and which call it also as ciliary ring. So, the ciliary body consists of the corona ciliaris and ciliary ring. The ciliary body is composite of the four layers that organize from external to internal: the superficial layer, ciliary muscles and stroma, and double layer of epithelium. Anatomical relationship. The anterior ciliary and long posterior ciliary arteries collect at the ciliary body. Additionally, the major nerves traveling into the anterior tissues of the eyeball pass through it. The ciliary body is continuous anteriorly with the iris and posteriorly with the retina of the ora serrata. Corona ciliaris is the region of the anterior inner surface of the ciliary body of the eye with the radiate the ciliary processes. Also, to the ciliary body can be found the zonular fibers. The zonular fibers are fibers that anchor the lens capsule to the ciliary body and the ciliary part of the retina. The function of these fibers is suspend the lens from the ciliary body where it sits immediately behind the iris. It transmits force produced by the contraction of the ciliary muscles of the lens, resulting the lens changing shape, allowing the eye focus on the distant object. Also, these fibers called as ligaments of Zinn. Inside of the ciliary body can be found several muscles, such as circular fibers of ciliary muscle and meridional or radial type of the muscle, responsible for the reflective power of the lens in the process of the accommodation. The iris. The circular pigmented membrane behind the cornea that surrounds the pupil, the most anterior portion of the vascular tunic of the eye. It is made up of the flat bar of circular muscular fibers surround the pupil and thin layer of smooth muscle fibers by which the pupil is dilated and regulate the amount of light entering their eye through the pupil, and posteriorly two layers of pigmental epithelial cells which are responsible for the color of the iris. This iris consists of the outer and inner surface. Also is bordered the two chambers, anterior and posterior chamber of the eye. It has inside two muscles, has sphincter of pupil, which constrict and make the pupil narrow, and dilatator of pupil, both of them innervated by different muscles. Also, the iris connected to the cornea and sclera by the trabecular retinaculum, which form the iridocorneal angle between the anterior and posterior chamber to reduce some amount of the fluid from anterior chamber to the venous system. In this trabecular retinaculum you can find the Schlemm's canal and spacer fontan, where is located the sinus which receive humerus aquosus from anterior chamber. And innermost layer of the eye is retina. The retina is the innermost of the three tunic fibers surround the vitreous body and continues posteriorly with optic nerve. Form the innerest layer. The function of the retina. The neural retina receive modulated and transmitted visual stimuli from the external environment to the optic nerve and the visual cortex of the brain. The retinal pigmented epithelium phagocytes the shed outer segments of the photoreceptors after the photopigments has been transformed by light. This is essential function of the health of the neural part of the retina. Also, the retina form the fundus of eye. There is retina, which form the fundus of eye, inside of which you can see the two most prominent things on it. It is optic disc, continues to the optic nerve. The optic disc, or it is optic nerve, and near the optic disc can be found some macula. Macula is the irregular yellowish depression of the retina about the 3 degrees wide lateral to and slightly below of the optic disc. And inside of this macula, inside in the center of it, find some depression, which call it fova centralis, is the tiny pit about 1 degree wide in the center of macula lutea, which turn the presence and extremely small depression, foveola, contains the rod-like elongated cones. It is the area of most acute vision, means here we have less layers of the retina, so light pass immediately to the cone. Also, these two points called as place of better vision or fova centralis or yellow spot or macula lutea, and blind spot, which call it optic disc. And also, healthy fundus of eye has highly vascularized and vessels are straight and pass directly from optic disc in different directions like rays without some curvations. And last one thing of the eye, it is eye core. It is innermost structures of the eye, which consist of the vitreous humor, the lens, and aqueous humor, which fill the two chambers. There is posterior chamber between the vitreous body and lens, and anterior chamber after passing of pupil. Okay, vitreous body. Vitreous body is clear gelatinous substance contained within the interest of the stroma of the vitreous body of the camera postrema of the eyeball. The vitreous humor or vitreous body is loosely attached to the inner surface of the retina, as the ciliary body at the posterior surface of the lens, most especially to the part of the plana of the ciliary body and the edge of the optic disc. Because the lens, the anterior surface of the vitreous humor, hollowest into deep concavity, the hyaluronate fossa, in which the lens sits. There is the place where the lens sits. Next, the lens. Lens has a huge capsule. There is lens and his capsule. The lens is transparent by convex body, which appears as some lens of the glasses or lens of the loupe, with anterior flat and posterior convex surfaces, has tough capsule and softer body or softer cortex, and serve as the some transmitting lens all for the light. And inside of the lens it can be found the some nucleus, the harder internal part of the nucleus of the lens, which form the skeleton of the lens. And last question is chambers. Chambers of the eye. The chambers of the eye, there are two main chambers. The eye has two cavities, posterior cavity and anterior cavity. The posterior cavity also has posterior chamber and anterior chamber, or anterior chamber, posterior chamber, and postrema, or most posterior part of the eyeball. If we zoom this structure, we will see the posterior chamber, which located between the ciliary body and lens and iris, and this ciliary body secrete the fluid which call it humerus aquosus, which fill the posterior chamber, and after it pass through the iris to the anterior chamber and fill the anterior chamber, and after pass from anterior chamber to the angle between the iris and cornea and sclera, irioscleral angle or iriocorneal angle, to diffuse into the venous system. Also, This fluid fill the postremous chamber and surround all compartments of the eye, such as vitreous body, supply it, and retina from inside. Okay, and this opening, which formed by the iris, call it pupil. The pupil is opening on the center of the iris of the eye, through which the light enters to the eye. Main light reflecting structures. First, cornea, anterior chamber, pupil or posterior chamber, lens, vitreous body, and retina. The light which passes through all these things pass through the conjunctiva, cornea, aqueous humor, lens, vitreous body, and pass to the retina. And accessory apparatus of the eye. To the accessory apparatus of the eye belongs the three main apparatus. First of all, it is lacrimal apparatus, protective apparatus, such as conjunctiva, active component of the eye, which call it extraocular muscles. Okay, step by step. First, lacrimal apparatus of the eye. Lacrimal apparatus of the eye, or glands which surround the eye, there are next. First, it is lacrimal gland, which is located in upper lateral corner of the orbit. There is glands or valve ring and conjunctival gland. All of these glands provide secretion of the tears or some serous fluid which surround and protect and nutrient the eye. The lacrimal gland. Lacrimal gland is either of part of the glands, one of the superior lateral angle of each orbit, secreting the tears. They are dividing into two portions, the orbital and palpebral, by the levator palpebral superior muscle, and divided by the muscle on the two portions. So when you closing your eyes, the muscle which open your eyelids compress the gland, and gland secrete the tears, and tears lubricate your eyes. After it, all these ducts and all these glands secrete the tears which fill the sacs which surround the eye, conjunctival sacs, and after it, all these tears collect into the rivers and lakes on the eye, onto the canals, and direct to the medial angle of the eye, to the carunculus, where the laminal carunculus pupils accept all these tears and direct it to the lacrimal sac, saccus lacrimalis, dilatate superior beginning of the nasolacrimal duct, located immediately within the orbit. It receives the lacrimal canaliculus, and it continues to the nasolacrimal duct and opens to the nasal cavity in inferior nasal meatus. Next, it is muscular apparatus of the eye. Muscular apparatus of the eye, which consists of the extraocular muscles. There are muscles which provide the movement of the eye, and muscles which provide movements of the eyelids. There are, first, eyelids. Palpebral part of the orbicular muscle, which is responsible for the closing your eyes. Next, it is levator palpebral superior, which divides lacrimal gland by its epinephrosis, and responsible for the opening the superior eyelid. And rectus muscle. They are 4 straight muscles and 2 oblique: medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior rectus, inferior rectus, and 2 oblique: inferior oblique muscle and superior oblique muscle. Superior oblique muscle, which related with trochlea of superior oblique muscle, which attached to the trochlear fossa of the frontal bone. All these muscles pull the eye, all rectus muscles pull the eye to the same side, so medial rectus pull the eye to the medial aspect, lateral to the lateral responsible for the adduction of the eye. And last one is superior and inferior oblique muscles, which pull the eye to the opposite side. For example, superior oblique muscle will depress and responsible for the looking down. And last one is protecting apparatus. There is skin which surround the eye on the orbit, skin of the eyelids. Next it is cartilages of the eyelids or eyelids at last. It is cilia or eyelashes, eyebrows. There is also cartilage of the eyelids, the glands inside the eyelids, such as tarsal glands, basals inside the eyelids, venous, arterial, and nerves ends inside this region. Also, there is main part of the eyelids and eye which protect this thing, it is conjunctiva. The conjunctiva is delicate membrane that lines the eyelid and covers the exposed surfaces of the sclera. It is transparent mucous membrane that extends and covers the posterior surface of eyelids, then falls back and forming fornices and extend over the eyeball, covering the sclera of the junction of the cornea. So it has two main parts. It has palpebral part and inner. Here it is scleral part. And between them it formed the fornices, superior fornices and inferior fornices. So it doesn't cover the cornea, it covered only sclera. It is the continuous with the skin of the eyelids and with the lacrimal canaliculus and the lacrimal sac. And when it close, form the conjunctival sinus, which provide circulation of the tears on the eye. Also has a globus cells which produce mucin that plays a defensive role in the protecting of surface of the eyeball from infection. Optic nerve is the second cranial nerve which, starting from optic disc of the retina, and transmit visual information from the eye, which is located in the eye socket, to the brain. Layers of the retina. The retina, or first part of the optic nerve, or part of the visual analyzer, which receives the visual information from the light, which pass through the all reflecting part of the eye, has two main parts. Actually, it has approximately 11 layers, but in anatomy, more important is two main layers, which divided by function. First of all, it is pigmental layer of the retina, which call it as blind part, and neural part responsible for the receiving of visual. There is three layers of cells. First of all, it is visual cells, which receive the visual information. Next one is layer of the bipolar neurons. And third one is retinal ganglion cells, which direct their axons to the optic disc and form the optic nerve. The optic nerve has next part, has retinal part, orbital part, cannular part, pass through the optic canal, cannular part, and last one is chiasmatic part or cranial part. It contains to the optic chiasm, which is located on the chiasmatic sulcus of the sphenoidal bone, a front of the pituitary gland, and contains to the optic tract, right and left. Specific of this chiasm is next that medial visual fields, medial visual tracts or medial visual fibers from the nasal parts of the retina decussate in the chiasma. Also, the optic tract transmits information to the midbrain and the thalamus. Optic tract continues to the midbrain, where it transmits visual information to the lateral genicular body, where the lateral genicular body distributes this information to the pulvinar of the thalamus, and to the superior colliculi of the midbrain. From the superior colliculi, it distributed downward by the tectospinal pathway, and from the pulvinar of thalamus appears the two pathways, loop of Meyer and the optical radiation, which runs to the occipital lobes of the calcarenial sulcus, which is the primary visual cortex. The optic nerve and all the visual pathway relate together with carotid artery and their branches. The internal carotid artery pass near the optic nerve, pass also the ophthalmic artery, together with the ophthalmic artery and anterior cerebral artery. Inside the eye, it's located near the ophthalmic artery, which supply the eye. So, sometimes the problems of the optic nerve can be common with the problems of ophthalmic artery. Next nerve, which related with the optic, there is oculomotor nerve. The oculomotor nerve is the motor nerve which pass from the midbrain to the orbit through the cavernous sinus of the medial cranial fossa. Start from the three nuclei of the midbrain and pass near the carotid artery, pass through the cavernous sinus, and appears in the orbit through the superior orbital fissure, together with others oculomotor nerves, such as trochlear and abducens. There it split on two branches, superior branch and inferior branch, and supply the muscle. Superior branch supply the superior branch supply the superior rectus muscle. Inferior branch supply the inferior branch supply inferior oblique muscle and supply the inferior rectus and medial rectus muscles. Also, the superior branch pass through the ciliary ganglion to the lens and supply the ciliary body to provide ciliary body and iris to provide the reaction of pupil for the light and accommodation reflexes. Next nerve is the trochlear nerve, which arises from posterior aspect of the midbrain below of the inferior colliculi and transmit fibers to the midcranial fossa on the lateral aspect of the brainstem, pass through the cavernous sinus, and appears in the orbit through the superior orbital fissure and supply only one muscle, superior oblique muscle, which is responsible for the moving eye below. And next one nerve. There is abducens nerve. Only one nerve of this side which pass immediately through the cavernous sinus near the carotid artery just below of it, and appears in the orbit through the midcranial fossa and supply only one muscle, lateral rectus muscle, responsible for the abduction of the eye. Abducens nerve responsible for the abduction of the eye. That was topography of these nerves.